Welcome back, everyone. It's me and Elena. For this show, we're going to have a conversation about reservation dogs. Pretty much everyone in Indian country was tuning in August and September for reservation dogs. It was historic moment, I would say, for Native people in mainstream television and cinema. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome back, Elena. You and I have not been on an episode together since like August or something like that, right? It's been forever. It's been a pretty rugged fall, but uh, yeah, lots of dumpster fire things happening in our lives, but we're coming around. I'm coming around at least, and I don't know. I'm just happy to be here with you.
I'm happy too. It does feel like it's been a long time, but it I was gonna say I thought it felt like it was slowing down a little and things were kind of getting a little easier, and then today happened, and anyway my computer was weird, and so we'll see what the rest of
Yeah,
the
no,
week
I
looks
thought
like.
today was going to be smooth. I was just going to like get some rest and wake up, drink my coffee, record this podcast. And actually, my day has been incredibly insane so far. Last minute emergencies, computer's not working. I don't know, maybe the universe is playing tricks on us. I don't really know. But I would just really like some calmness sometime soon because, man, I feel like 2021 has just been so intense. And last year was so goddamn intense too. Like it's just so intense. I know. Seriously. I yeah. Well, maybe our conversation today about reservation dogs will be, I don't know, just kind of a fun little break. And I hope you all listening just are kind of along for the ride with us as we give a breakdown. So we were talking when we were prepping, and apparently there hasn't really been like a solid Indigenous review of the first season of Reservation Dogs, which is completely shocking to me. So this might be the first one. So you're hearing it first here on Red Power Hour, Red Nation. I mean, it's really just me and Elena giving our perspective on the show, but you know what? I would not, I would rather talk to you than anybody else about this show.
And this is our
This is authoritative.
authoritative. This is totally authoritative. This is our authoritative opinion.
Yeah, you got your two Indigenous women giving their authoritative opinions about this show.
That's right.
It's our way and only our way. Well, uh, as always, I'm calling in from Tiwa Territory, otherwise known as Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Elena is calling in from Ogapoge, otherwise known as Santa Fe. So we're here in New Mexico, which is yet again a COVID hotspot. The numbers have risen precipitously over the past week. COVID wards in the Navajo Nation have had to open back up. And despite the fact that New Mexico is one of those states right now where everyone is masked still in public, I'm just making a public service announcement. We're not talking about COVID today in the episode, but I just got my booster a couple of days ago, still recovering from my side effects. But my parents both got COVID earlier this week. They're very elderly and they're recovering and they're fine. But I'm just letting people know like COVID isn't over. We are having a real uptick in cases. And my parents are vaccinated, and they still got COVID. And so I just want to really encourage everyone listening. If you're vaccinated, go get your booster because there are actually a lot of people who are contracting the virus right now who are vaccinated. So the efficacy of the vaccine, if it's 6 months or more, has really worn off. And if you don't get vaccinated, then you're putting like kids and elders at risk. And so please protect yourselves, your families, and your community. I know that's a little bit preachy, but I don't give a shit. My mom is 82, And so actually, I think it was the vaccine. My parents both got the Moderna vaccine, but I think it was actually the vaccine that prevented them from both having much more severe symptoms in their age group. So yeah, go protect yourselves some more and keep it vigilant because it's still pretty hardcore out there with COVID.
I got my booster 3-4 weeks ago. We just found out yesterday my brother-in-law's in the
Oh,
hospital.
Elena,
He has COVID.
I'm
He was
sorry.
vaccinated, but he had a major surgery, so we're not quite sure what caused the hospitalization. But having COVID on top of that is not helpful. So get your boosters, mask up. It is, like Melanie said, it is no joke. We are having, a lot, and I think, honestly, at least in this part of northern New Mexico, a lot of it is goddamn tourists coming in, and they're not vaccinated because who's right next to us? Texas. And they're coming in unvaccinated and just spreading it all over the place. So get your boosters. Everybody in New Mexico. Doesn't matter how old you are.
Get your boosters. Yeah, keep wearing your masks. And just stay home stay home as much as you possibly can. Yeah, I think it's a lot of Arizona also. I was in Arizona a couple weeks ago in Flagstaff on the eastern or western side of Navajo Nation, and no one was wearing a mask. No one in northern Arizona, including Diné people. And I was just like, I don't know, y'all. Like, people going to shows and going to super spreader events. It's just, I don't. Maybe people just stopped caring, but I didn't stop caring. So.
No, we have a friend in town from Hopi, and he's battling cancer right now, and I would not I wouldn't go anywhere near anyone like that without a mask, inside, outside, because we have to protect our relatives. We have to protect ourselves, our families, our relatives, our communities. We can't stand to lose any more
Totally.
people.
I myself had gotten more lax, I think, after I got vaccinated and as the fall wore on. So we were teaching in person again at UNM. And I actually just the week before we found out my parents got COVID, I had scheduled my booster. I had to wait about 10 days before there was an appointment opened for my booster. But I was reading and I was just like, oh man, I think COVID's coming back. It's going to be a rager, in November and December. Like, I got to take this more seriously again. Told all my students to get boosters. I actually switched over completely to Zoom for the last month of the semester. And no sooner had I done that than 2 days later found out that my parents had COVID. So it's the real deal, y'all. Keep it. No, we're not out of it yet at all. And there's actually, the numbers are really high right now, and they're going to sustain for quite some time. So holidays are coming. Just be smart and keep yourself safe and keep our people safe. If you're not going to keep yourself safe, I don't know, man. At least just do it for our people. Because like Elena said, we don't want to lose anybody else. Well, on that super cheerful note, let's just keep this dumpster fire of 2020 and 2021 going. No, this being said, actually, I'm going to do what I do for every show is I'm going to do a Patreon pitch, right? I'm going to encourage all of you to please subscribe to our Patreon. You can do it at $1. You can do it at $1,000. That would be great if one of you. If there's a celebrity who listens to our show, give us a 1K. Give us a K a month, 1K a month. And then we'll be able to hire all the Native women that we need to do the media work. But you can find us at patreon.com under Red Media. I talk a lot about what Red Media is every episode, but Red Media essentially is an Indigenous-run media project. We foreground Indigenous voices. We're not interested in catering to settler attitudes or settler aesthetics. It's really Indigenous media by and for Indigenous people, and actually Reservation Dogs is kind of Indigenous media by and for Indigenous people, which is what we're going to talk about today. We're trying to reach 2,000 patrons. We're at 1,686, so we have a little over 300 to go. In order to do our next podcast spinoff, which is called Native Reads, which is, again, just about kind of Indigenous intellectual exchange. So it's Indigenous writers interviewing other Indigenous writers. I'm hoping that we can maybe get to our 2,000 mark by the end of 2021. I know we only have a little over a month left, but maybe we can do some sort of push or some drive. But I just want to encourage you to let your family and friends know that they can join our Patreon. Again, it can be as little as $1 a month. You get some swag. You get some Red Nation and Red Media swag if you join. And the reason why I brought up Patreon right as soon as we were done talking about this uptick in COVID everywhere, but definitely in Indian country, is, the last almost 2 years, the Red Nation has been doing a ton of mutual aid. And actually, the Patreon dollars that our patrons have given us, since the pandemic started, has gone towards, buying wood and hauling wood for elders who have COVID out in Pine Ridge, putting together burritos and sandwiches and care packages for relatives who live on the streets in places like Albuquerque, also out in the Navajo Nation. And so your Patreon donations go to more than just funding the production of our podcast. It goes towards employing Native women to do incredible media work, working class Native women primarily, And then it also goes to mutual aid for high risk COVID communities, particularly Indigenous communities out on the res. So please consider joining us or encouraging others to join us on Patreon. If you want to learn more about the Red Nation, you can visit us on our website at therednation.org. And if you want to learn more about Red Media, it's still kind of under construction, but we have a new website at www.redmedia.press. And again, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com under Red Media. So speaking about Indigenous media by and for Indigenous people, reservation dogs. So I had said earlier in a conversation about this that, like, if you don't know what reservation dogs is, I'm not sure we can be friends, because everybody, like every Indian in the world, was tuning in August and September when the first season of Reservation Dogs dropped. So just a little bit more about the show, right? It had an 8-episode run for its first season. It was released in early August and ran to early September of 2021. It was renewed very quickly for a second season, so we get to look forward in 2022 to another season. I think there's a lot of room for growth, and directions and storylines for season 2. So I'm really excited. The series was filmed entirely on location in Oklahoma. So if people don't know, one of the series frontrunners, Sterling Harjo, is an enrolled citizen of the Seminole Nation, but also comes from Muskogee Creek background or heritage. And so you kind of find out about halfway through the show that you're pretty sure that the show is it's in a fictional reservation community, but it's Creek. It's a Muskogee Creek community and reservation in eastern Oklahoma. And so that's kind of where the show takes place, filmed on location, I think on the res. It looks like the actual res where the show was filmed. And just really briefly, we'll just go right into this. The plot, if you look on IMDb or Wikipedia or whatever about the show, it's the show is about 4, young Native American, they always say Native American teenagers, 4 Native American teenagers, trying to hustle on the res to raise enough money to go to California because they want to get off the reservation. You end up finding out why they kind of want to leave. They want to leave the res and go to the big city, to LA or something, to find themselves as adults and to live out their dreams. And the first episode of the season kind of is about that, but then you find out that the other 7 episodes are not really about that at all. And so the storytelling structure is not linear in that way. The show does not end up being really about these 4 teenagers who are the 4 main characters of the show. So that's Bear, Alora, Willie, Jack, and Cheese are these 4 besties living in this Creek community trying to hustle to go to California. But the show really meanders through lots of different stories. So there isn't really a plot, I would say, in the first season. So you can't really talk about it that way. One other thing before I hand it over to Elena to talk a bit more about the function of storytelling in the show is one of the other showrunners or frontrunners for the show, main executive producers and writers, is of course the really well-known Maori director Taika Waititi, right? My favorite thing that he did was the Guardians of the Galaxy movie that he directed a few years ago. But when I found out that it was Taika Waititi and Sterling Harjo, Sterling is actually very well known in Indian country as an Indigenous creative, probably one of the most well-known writers, I would say, in Indian country. And so when I learned that those 2 were kind of the main writers of the show, I was actually very excited because I was this is going to be a really interesting show, path-breaking. It's going to be a path-breaking show. And if you look at the credits for the directors, all of the directors for all of the episodes are Indigenous directors as well. So Sydney Freeland is this Navajo director who had directed, I don't know how many of the episodes Sydney directed, but Sydney has also been directing episodes for the Peacock Network's Rutherford Falls, which we did an episode on a few months ago. We did not like that show as much as we like Reservation Dogs, so these are going to be very different reviews. But nevertheless, it's it's a good time to be an Indigenous creative because I think that there are things happening in Hollywood and there are opportunities that did not exist even 2 or 3 years ago. But anyway, let's talk about the storytelling structure because I feel like this is a very Indigenous thing to kind of start us off with, but I'm going to pass it over to you, Elena.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's a really exciting time to see what Sterling Harjo and Taika Waititi can do. And the other thing that I loved about this, before we talk about the storytelling, is just that these 4 young actors that play the main characters in this show are virtually unknown. They're probably not unknown
Yeah.
to their own communities and to more localized acting, but I'd never seen any of them before, and I watch every bad native movie that's ever done just to see,
Like
or maybe not all
90%
of
of
them, but
movies
I've
that have
seen
been
most of
made,
them.
both by Indigenous people and about Indigenous people, are bad.
Yeah, yep. And I watch the series that have native characters just to see what's out there. And these four are amazing, and they're all, I think, virtually unknown. So it's exciting to see our young people being able to find work that's meaningful to them, but also to the rest of Indian country, because I know just from social media and from young people in the Red Nation, our young comrades, who like waited for Sunday night just to watch Res Dogs. And it's amazing. It speaks to us. And as Melanie said, there's not really a linear storyline. There is the underlying sort of subtext of these four discussing getting out and running away to California. And they're all young. So they're not even out of high school. So when I say running away, I mean literally like they're going to run away from their homes and their families. But after the first episode, when sort of that's established, the rest of them are all about relationality and relationality to their families, to each other, to their community. You see little vignettes of their parents. You see them interacting with their parents, except for Cheese, who has a grandma episode. And so each episode sort of shows us what's important to each character, but it's done in a very non-linear fashion, very much a storytelling fashion, which we all grew up with. And it's just a beautiful way of telling a story because it highlights what's important, and it oftentimes starts in the middle and then cycles around to the beginning. And so the beginning is at the end. And that's what they do, introducing the individual who has passed, who's committed suicide, and who was, I believe he was Willie Jack's cousin, and Alora Dannon's love interest, but he was central to these, five, and then now they're four. So, but it starts in the middle of the story, and then it circles around, and you get him, and I don't remember his name.
Which one?
The one
Daniel?
who committed suicide.
His name's Daniel.
Daniel. So you get Daniel's story in 2 or 3 different episodes. You get pieces of it in 2 or 3 different episodes, but you don't get it all at once. Like I said, it's not linear, and so it's the way it's introduced is really beautiful, and it's very much in storytelling tradition where stories all blend together, but they don't always start at the beginning and they don't always end at the end. And sometimes they don't end at all. Sometimes they're all very open-ended, like what is happening with Reservation Dogs. So it's really a very indigenous way of telling a story.